Well, hey everyone, Chris McIntyre, almost above average podcast here. I wanted to run you through The Real Threat, an article written on Substack by author Anthony Christian. The Real Threat Friday, Weaponization of Federal Power. This week, we watched two moves that show how far the regime is willing to go. The FBI raid on John Bolton, it's not about justice, about intimidation. Critics get punished, and that's the message. Everyone should get this message loud and clear. No doubt in my mind, Biden and Obama will be next. Military deployments into blue cities, dressed up as crime prevention, but in reality, a conditioning drill to normalize occupation and opposition strongholds. Tell me again, what the midterms will be like? This is a collapse in plain sight. Law enforcement and the military turn inward, used as political weapons. Internal compliance is here. Next will be a detention center in every red state. For every prisoner they keep, the state will get funds. This is how red states survive under regime infrastructure once the blue states' funds stop rolling in. The plan is to collapse them completely. If the regime stays in power long enough, we will see this come to pass. Why this matters more than people think? Most Americans see themselves as isolated events. A raid here, a deployment there, but that's the danger. Once these steps feel routine, they become permanent tools of suppression, and I would argue that it is getting to feel like that right now. I mean, they've deployed them in LA, they've deployed them in Washington, D.C. I've heard reports about other cities, but if it's not happening in your city, it seems to be like no one's really, well, it's not happening here. It's not really that big of a deal. That seems to be the overwhelming sentiment that I get when I'm just talking to people out here in the world. Like, even the deportations, like, it's not a big deal. I haven't seen any ICE raids. It's like, you haven't seen it. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Anyway, that's besides. Most Americans still see these as isolated events, a raid here, a deployment there, but that's the danger. Once these steps feel routine, they become permanent tools of suppression. Bolton's raid tells every official, journalist, and citizen you can be next. Troops on the streets tell every blue city resistance can be patrolled away. Local police look like they can't do their jobs. And redistricting locks in the mass so the regime keeps power even if they lose the vote. This is not an abstract event. It is the scaffolding of authoritarianism being bolted into place. And authoritarian regimes don't announce themselves with a single decree. They creep in slowly. First, critics are investigated and harassed until silence feels safer than speaking. Then, troops or police appear in the streets under the banner of safety. Courts and legislatures start to bend, not with dramatic overhauls, but with small little rulings and quiet concessions. Media outlets echo the same story until dissent feels like we're going crazy. Then ordinary people keep their heads down, not because they agree, but because the cost of defiance rises month by month. By the time the walls are fully built, the state no longer asks for compliance. Fear has already trained people to give it willingly. The deployment of the U.S. troops under the guise of crime is no different than the immigrant invasion narrative, a manufactured excuse for force. In a year, if this trajectory holds, troops will be deployed across every blue state in the country: Chicago, Las Vegas, Boston, Burlington. Look at what has been normalized inside just 100 days and ask yourself, do you believe the only opposition party is fighting as though that future is coming? The answer is no. They couldn't even weaponize the fact that millions lost healthcare. They defaulted to the same old strategy, another committee investigation into Epstein. You don't fight authoritarianism with committees. You fight it by turning lies into bombs and detonating them every day, everywhere with the truth, until the truth is all that's left. The strategy to win. Consultants still think this is about political policies turning into votes. They're wrong. Policies don't matter until you win the narrative war. The regime floods the system with propaganda. The only way to compete is to flood the system with truth at scale. That means 20 to 30 Gavins on air every single week. That's Gavin Newsom. Not one spark, but a rolling fire brigade. Stop answering bad faith questions. Flip the script live on camera. Show up everywhere with the same sharp language, fact-based, polarized, confident. Humiliate propagandists by name. Make clips that new media and legacy media cannot ignore. And let's give a shout out to Governor Newsom for the way he's been messaging on Twitter and even in person now. Like, they're riding a wave of his messaging. Just he decided to copy Donald Trump's verbiage on Twitter, and that is setting the MAGA media sphere on fire. And I love it. Like I think he's doing it right, and that's what Anthony Christian is saying here. That's how we need to show up. That's how we win this war. That's the only way to fight back. Show up everywhere with the same sharp language, hammered, fact-based, polarizing, and confident. Humiliate propagandists by name. Make clips new media and legacy media cannot ignore. Coordinate. Stop dropping one-off sound bites like "this is upsetting" or "this looks like martial law practice." That's commentary bullshit, not fire. The first authoritarian regime in American history is not going to politely hand over power because of midterm math. Regimes consolidate, they arrest, they lie, they kill, and they use the system itself to harden control. So don't come at me with "we'll just win in November." If you're not countering propaganda at scale, you're not paying attention. One Gavin gives you a 24-hour news cycle. 30 Gavins creates a drumbeat so loud it changes perception and forces right-wing media to cover up even when it don't want to. That's the blueprint. The wall of truth against the wall of lies. And it matters more than anything else right now. More than policies, more than Epstein, more than any single investigation. The regime already has their wall. Every elected leader, every pundit, every outlet matching in lockstep, sending lies until they harden into truth in the American mind. And too many consultants still don't get it. They talk like policies alone will win voters. That's fantasy. You don't get to policy until you break the narrative stronghold. What Gavin is doing isn't about winning votes directly. It's about stopping propaganda from hardening. When legacy media, our media, and even right-wing media are forced to cover a fight, the lies stall. The narrative cracks. And once that happens, policies can finally breathe. We've been saying this for months. February, March, April, May, June, July. It's all in the archive. But suddenly, people act like Gavin just invented the wheel. He didn't. He showed what happens when someone actually fights and why permission politics is fucking over. It's sad because Gavin Newsom is the only one showing up to fight and no one else is jumping on the bandwagon. I'll jump on the bandwagon. Let's go. This is about whether America collapses into a police state that benefits one side and it sure as hell isn't your side. When 20 to 30 elected Democrats do this at once, the effect is exponential. Suddenly, memes explode, right-wing media is forced to spin and lie more, which makes them look ridiculous, and their spin saturates the bloodstream anyway. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok light up. The blue-based memes remix into cultural ammo. Clips and headlines spread to audiences cracking under the weight of their own lies, and it seeds doubt where the regime can't afford to lose it. Want to know why millions don't trust Democrats? 9 years of unchecked propaganda, lies allowed to fester and harden. Ask any right-wing idiot, they will tell you about corruption and say Biden and Obama. Their side is so wrapped up in the corruption lie, their veterans believe that shit. This isn't some new discovery. It's the only way to fight propaganda at scale. Stop the lies, force the fight, then, and only then, can policies enter the conversation. Until that happens, it's the same old shit. The hidden hypocrisy. The states sending guard units to occupy blue cities are the same states living off blue tax dollars. Without California, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, states like Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky would collapse. They bite the hand that feeds them, then dress it up as patriotism. Call it what it is. Parasitism in uniform. Red states will have food lines first. We need to be clear about that. Just like they were the first when the regime took power the first day. Defiance Note Friday. The threats are real, but so is the resistance. Across the country, Americans are rising, protesting, organizing, and refusing to bow. Hope isn't decoration. It's strategy. Every act of defiance makes it harder for the regime to normalize their grip. And I agree with that. Part of this, I'm basically just doubling this content and trying to re-put it out there to my audience. There's a lot of us doing this, just trying to build up an army, just enough voices in the pro-democracy world to change the tide. So if you made it this far, hit subscribe, please, and check out the Almost Above Average podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. We'll continue. The Singing Revolution, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania in the late 1980s. For decades, the Baltic states were under Soviet control, forced to suppress their culture and identities. Instead of picking up weapons, people picked up songs. In Estonia, nearly 300,000 people gathered at Tallinn Song Festival grounds to sing banned national songs in unison, an act that directly defied Soviet orders. That's beautiful. It spread across Latvia and Lithuania, choirs, public gatherings, candlelight vigils, and human chains stretching for miles. No propaganda could erase the sound of entire nations reclaiming their voice. What started as just singing turned into a movement that helped crack Soviet power in the regime. Without firing a shot, they showed the world and themselves that defiance multiplies when it's visible, audible, and shared. This is how nonviolent acts of defiance turn into movements and force change. Right now, across the country, there are small acts of defiance happening anywhere. The smallest acts of defiance can move things forward for all of us. The regime's hunger for control is frantic because it is so unnatural to Americans in our culture. Tyranny has to be propped up every hour of every day with constant pressure. It cracks, it leaks, it breaks under its own weight. Their authority is always weak and brittle. It is why they need troops to enforce. It's why they use the FBI to raid homes of enemies. Oppression is fear dressed up as power. One thing is always clear: regimes are filled with fear because they know what happens once they lose. What is this little clip? The scaffolding of authoritarianism. It never starts with one decree, it creeps in. Critics silence, troops in the streets for safety, courts bending inch by inch, media echoing until dissent feels insane. By the time the walls are built, compliance doesn't need to be demanded. Fear trains people to give it willingly. Troops in blue cities today are no different than the immigrant invasion lies. Pretext for force: a year from now, deployments will cover every blue state if nothing changes. And the opposition? They couldn't even weaponize a healthcare cutoff for millions. You don't fight authoritarianism with committees. You fight it by turning lies into bombs and detonating them at every single day with the truth. In closing, this isn't about policies first, votes first, or donors first. It's about a narrative dominance. Shut down propaganda, fight at scale, and only then will policy and votes follow. Until the Democrats understand that, the collapse accelerates. So I'll link to him in the show notes. This is author Anthony Christian. You can find him on Substack. I've been covering a lot of his articles because I like his punchiness, and he's obviously a Democrat, but he's kind of sick of the Democrats. And to be honest, I kind of am too. They're not fighting at all. It's only Governor Newsom right now. He's the only one taking the fight to them the way it should be brought, taking it the way Trump fights. So hopefully you enjoyed that. My name is Chris McIntyre. This is the Almost Above Average podcast produced by the McMedia Network. Please drop a comment and hit subscribe. I will link to author Anthony Christian in the show notes from Substack, so go over there and follow him. And then we'll see you next time. I think Jonathan and I will be back tomorrow covering whatever craziness happens between now and then. So hit subscribe and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.